everybody. Gonna get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Um, Welcome to the launch of the IDB JPAL Visiting Scholar Program. Before we get started, I just wanted to say a couple of things. One, that we're going to have photography, and two, that we're going to be recording this session. So we're delighted to have you all here in DC, those of you in the room and those of you connected virtually. Today, we gather to explore the important collaboration between the IDB and JPAL. This collaboration is in the service of harnessing the most important, the best development evidence in the service of policy and development impact across Latin America. So to get us started, I'd like to introduce Ana Maria Ibanez, the Vice President for Sectors and Knowledge at the IDB, who will introduce the collaboration, tell us a few words and her perspective. So, thank you, Ana Maria.
Thank you very much, Valentina. And I would like to first thank Mariano Bosch and Jose Martinez. They have been behind this jointly with JPAL to get this to become a reality. And I think that's very important. So I wanted to express my gratitude to them. I am very excited today. I'm very excited because for us, this is an important partnership. This initiative presents really an exciting opportunity for collaboration between the IDP and JPAL, bringing together JPAL's talented researchers, and I would say also bringing together our talented staff that are quite knowledgeable on sectors and are quite knowledgeable on the region and the countries in the region and the development challenges that we have. So by joining together all these teams, I am very excited about this partnership. I think we can do nice things and important things together. At the IDB, we firmly believe that knowledge and evidence are the foundation of informed decision-making and the driving forces behind impactful development projects. In fact, we believe that the main value added of the IDB is the knowledge that we generate to support the countries in the region and to support policy discussions in the region. Our new institutional strategy, Transforming for Scale and Impact, highlights our commitment to generating and promoting knowledge to guide policy design and also to guide project design and project execution and supervision. We are intensifying our efforts to produce and share knowledge. We are investing time, we are investing resources for that. And we believe this is a valuable asset to drive innovative solutions, generate data and analysis, and collaborate with partners to amplify the scale and impact of our work. In short, with this new strategy, what we want to do is that we are reaffirming our role as IDB Group as a knowledge bank, as a knowledge institution, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, is one of our main value addeds, if not our main value added. And we are focusing on achieving three important goals. The first one is that we are improving the governance of how we pursue and fund knowledge at the IDB. And this is not minor. This is a big institution, and governance is important for that to happen. In 2024, we established the Knowledge Advisory Committee to oversee the quality, and I underscore quality, and coordination of knowledge products across the IDB group. But this is not only about coordination. We are backing it with resources. This year, VPS and SPD launched the Development and Effectiveness Intelligence Fund. This is an internal competitive call for proposals aimed at closing strategic knowledge gaps in development effectiveness. It supports projects focused on impact evaluations, but not only impact evaluations. We are also supporting projects that support programmatic interventions and better understanding of the factors that make a project successful throughout the execution of the project. We hope to secure additional resources for next year and are actively seeking partners to improve what we are doing in this respect. In parallel, our colleagues at VPC launched an internal call for proposals to explore the role of AI in these efforts. And what we are envisioning is that we are going to expand all these activities throughout the coming years. Second, we are enhancing how we manage knowledge, which again is not a minor thing, especially in a big institution like ours. And the purpose is to make relevant institutional knowledge easily accessible to both our staff and our partners. We can produce vast amounts of knowledge, but this is not available to the staff, which are working on a fast paced environment. The knowledge will not be used as it should be used. The IDB group is developing a new knowledge platform designed to leverage one of our key comparative advantages, the feedback loop between knowledge and between the operations that we design and execute in all the countries of our region. This platform will systematically share and apply lessons learned from projects across the organization, and it will make it readily available for all the staff in the institution to use it in a good way. Finally, we are improving how we communicate knowledge. We are working on structuring communications around policy debates that are badly needed in the region and private sector decision making to better align internal incentives and seize strategic opportunities that will enhance the IDB's influence in regional policy discussions. In addition to these efforts, we are forming a new data group, revitalizing our regional policy dialogues, which are essential tools for sharing knowledge with our counterparts, and creating a poverty group, which will also generate important evidence on poverty and data, and investing in new ways to measure the impact of our knowledge. It is within this context that we welcome the partnership with JPAL and the JPAL Visiting Researcher Program. We eagerly anticipate the valuable insights and contributions from our visiting researchers, and we are going to benefit, I know, quite significantly from them. And we are confident that this program will foster lasting partnerships, which is our ultimate goal with this program. Thank you very much for being part of this important occasion, and I now would like to extend the floor to our partner, Iqbal Dhaliwal, the Global Executive Director of JPAL. Thank you for being here, Iqbal. Looking forward to your intervention.
That's for later. That's for my... Yes, I'm audible. Generally, it's the other way around. My family always complains I talk too loud. So it's generally, that's not a problem. Anna Maria, thank you so much for that warm welcome and for the introduction. Much appreciated. And thank you for having me and the rest of the team here. The Latin American region is a core part of what JPAL does. We were started at MIT's economics department 20 years ago. And it was in our 5th year itself that we opened a huge presence or a small presence in Chile, which then grew to presence in Brazil, in Peru, in Dominican Republic, in Mexico. And so we worked across a lot of Latin American countries. And oftentimes people would ask us, they said, well, we thought that the Poverty Action Lab is mostly for very low income countries. But I think for us, it was always going to be a two-way street. Number one, of course, what can we do to help using randomized impact evaluations in the Latin American region, which is obviously itself very diverse. If you go from countries like Chile all the way to Central America. But also we wanted to be an engine for transferring what is learned and the knowledge in the Latin American countries to the other parts of the world where we work. Because I think there are really some core areas where Latin America was in the forefront of things. If you think about some of the social protection programs that happened in Mexico around cash transfers, if you think about some of the incredible work which is being done in Colombia and other countries on crime and violence, there's a lot that has to be learned from Latin America and taken to the other parts of the world. So because of that, and so how are we working with the IDB? So the IDB is an institution that we greatly respect and admire, not just for the funding that you provide, much needed resources, but also for the research and the technical advising that you get. Very much like what you mentioned, Anna Maria, like every time you do a survey of people and say, okay, what do you value most about an institution like IDB? Sure, money is there, but I think for the people on the ground, the technical advising, the research, the insights, and the partnerships are really, really important. And we'd always worked at individual levels with the IDB. We had people like Paul Gertler and Claudia Martinez and Jen LaFortune, like some of our researchers who had worked with IDB. But we hadn't worked on it in a very more institutional way till Paula Pedro, who's the head of my Latin America office, and our colleague Mariano started the Joy Brazil, which is the Jobs and the Opportunity Initiative in Brazil, to figure out how can we best tackle the problems of unemployment and skilling gap and so forth. So very excited to make that happen. And then last year, where we were very fortunate that Elon actually came to MIT, he visited a number of labs and centers, including the economics department where JPAL is based. And we were able to brainstorm for almost an hour, hour and a half. I was still joking with him because Elon arrived alone in the lobby of our building. And I was like, Elon, where is the rest of your entourage? But I think that very much reflected exactly who he is. Like, he really wanted to get down to business. And he said exactly what you said. He said, I want to try and see how IDB can become a knowledge bank, a more evidence and impact-driven bank. And given that where we are at JPAL, how can we partner? So for all those reasons, I'm absolutely delighted that we are starting with the Visiting Scholar program. I think this is a way for us to institutionalize the connection between the two organizations, for you to get to know us, for us to get to know various parts of the IDB and what are your core priorities. And the one thing I also want to highlight is that even though you are going to see our visiting scholars at the forefront of this particular program, the entire weight of JPAL as an organization will be behind these visiting scholars, very much like you talked about the staff. JPAL is an organization which has about 600 permanent staff around the world, another 2,000 surveyors and others at any point of time. And they complement the professors and the researchers in a way that individual researchers often don't have that support, whether it is in doing, meta-analysis. My friend Marie Gardner just walked in, so I could not avoid putting in meta-analysis in there. But we do policy insights. We do a lot of work on understanding how the research translates and maps to the policy priorities of the governments. And so we are happy for all of that to be behind these visiting scholars. So even though you will see one of them, some of my colleagues are here in the room who will be actually supporting them. So with that, I just want to say once more, I'll be talking a lot the rest of the day, so I don't want to spend more time talking right now. But thank you very much for having us. Thanks to Ilan, thanks to you, Ana Maria, thanks to Mariano and to Jose for all that you have done to make this agreement go off. And I can't tell you on behalf of the entire leadership at JPAL how excited we are. Thank you. Okay. You don't want to be easier that way to do it in the end? Okay. It's a small room, so like I'm happy to do Q&A in the end, but if you have some urgent questions, I think we'll be able to hear everybody even without the mic. Okay, so one of the things that I was asked to talk about was evidence to policy. So JPAL is well known for the depth, the amount of research that we do, but in a sense, that research could have happened even without creating an organization like JPAL. The individual professors could have kind of done that research. So what was the reason to move from research to having an organization like this, which is a permanent organization, and kind of that's going to be the theme of my talk today. So I thought I would just motivate this session by picking up an example which is actually quite important for the Americas, but also for the Asias, which is stubble and forest burning. It's on the rise despite damages to air quality, health, and climate and soil. Globally, this has increased by more than 50% since 1960. And surprisingly, 26% of these emissions in the last 50 years have actually come from the Americas. And so why do farmers burn these stubble, right? Like there is lots and lots of reasons people will give you. They'll say, well, it's cheaper to burn the stubble rather than to pull it out manually. Others will say that farmers are misinformed. They think that there is some health value of burning the stubble, some sort of a nutritional value to the ground. and so forth. And so what is the, so we set aside to say that how can we tackle this problem? So we worked with the governments in India, we worked with, we talked to folks in different parts of the world and said, okay, what are the different type of solutions that could help in this problem? So the first type of thing was, let's inform or educate farmers about the environmental and health harm of stubble burning. Maybe farmers are ill-informed and that's why they are burning it. So that was a lot of policymakers said that let's do that. Then there were a bunch of people who said, let's do high fines and strict enforcement. They said, there is a rule which says you cannot burn and this is causing emission. People who are burning their farms should be fined, and we are going to create a whole command and control structure to identify and find them. The agriculture departments in India were very interested in the stubble removing equipment because they said, well, because of climate change, the season has shortened. And so maybe if you have these things called happy seeders, they'll pull the stubble out mechanically very fast. And then some researchers in the network said, well, why don't we try about something else, which is give farmers a cash incentive for not burning the farm and see what the stubble and see what happens. So I think this example illustrates the fundamental dilemma that policymakers have. Lots of time people outside of policy think that, oh, like policymakers are starved of good solutions. They don't know good ideas. And I always have to tell them that, no, actually, our problem is completely the opposite. Sometimes we have too many very logical and good solutions staring at us in the face. The question is, which of these will work better than the other? So what we decided to do, along with, so the PIs on this were Kelsey Jack, who's at Berkeley, Seema Jayachandran at Princeton, Namrata, who's at MIT, and Rohini, who's at Yale. And so it was kind of a 4-university partnership anchored by JPAL, and we started working with Government of Punjab. And we said, well, let's keep a control group. Let's do this as a randomized evaluation for the payment for eco-services. And to some of these farmers, we'll issue a standard payment for a PESS payment for eco-services contract, 800 rupees per acre. 800 rupees is approximately $10 US. And to some farmers, we'll give double that amount, which is about $20 US per acre for not burning their field. But this is a standard PES contract. The payment will be made ex post after the season is, the burning season is over. But then we said, why don't we try something different? Why don't we instead try giving some people 25% of the 800 rupees upfront, and to some others, let's give them 50%, half the payment upfront as a completely unconditional transfer. It doesn't matter whether you burn or not. We hope you don't burn, but let's give it. And the assumption was that maybe what is happening is that there's a credit constraint. This is the farmers who are, who don't have the money yet to be able, their previous crops haven't been sold yet. They don't have the money to hire the labor or the others to kind of do this pulling manually or mechanically. And so what did we find? I will just tell you that I was in this room with the chief secretary and others of the state when this was designed, and everybody, first of all, thought that payment for eco services will not work because they said nobody trusts the government to give money. And then everybody's money was on the box in the middle, which is, the only thing that might work is the 1,600 rupees and conditional on people not burning. Well, it so happened that actually providing upfront payments is the one which reduced crop burning by 12 percentage points. And the standard contract had absolutely no impact. So promising people 800 rupees or 1,600 rupees for not burning yielded nothing, but just trusting them and giving them that money actually led to a 12 percentage points reduction. And remember, this is the first time we did it. It's not as if like it was people trusted us or believed in us. If this had gone on for longer, the hypothesis is it would have gotten more. But then you look at the cost per life saved, it's remarkable. It's just $3,600 to $5,400 per cost per life saved. Huge health harms of this thing happening. Oops, this froze. Ah, good. But here is the fun part. reducing the burning had absolutely no adverse effects on crop yields or time between planting and harvesting. So this was one of the biggest concerns of the agriculture department, that this is going to lead to a reduction in yields in these for these farmers and so forth, because this is going to be inefficient. The farmers are doing the most efficient thing. It turns out that they were not. And now we are developing a cheaper, more scalable program that can be scaled up in consultation with both the state and the central government. So I think I illustrate this example for multiple reasons that, often people will say, look, randomized evaluations can solve small problems. They can't solve big problems. Think about this, right? Like for those of you who have ever been to Delhi in November, December, or January, this is a problem that affects hundreds of millions of people because the smoke from Punjab and this belt completely envelops the northern India. In fact, if you Google it now, smog in Delhi, crop fire burnings, like it will be head news in all Indian newspapers. It's a problem that has been intransigent year after year. And it's a problem where actually counterintuitive solutions work. But you would not know that without doing these RCTs. Okay. The same payment for eco-services systems we are doing in different countries. The same thing can be applied to burning forest land next to the Amazon, for instance. The same thing happened. We tried out in Uganda in a payment for eco-services study. We are doing it in Mexico, where full enrollment contract actually quadruples the cost effectiveness that you just saw. And now we have a partnership with the Brazilian Ministry of the Environment on redesign of Bolsa Verde as the national PS program to incorporate that. All right, there's a little bit of lag, I think. Okay, great. So I think the same creativity and flexibility of the RCTs can answer a wide range of questions. We just randomly picked a few examples here. For instance, in Chile, does renovating public plazas improve neighborhood security and community involvement? These are three of the areas that this partnership is working in. Same way, how do you reduce overfishing in a cost-effective manner by giving the right information to the fishermen? And then how does access to infrastructure impact citizens? Again, a study done in Mexico, which answers questions in a very, very creative way. Okay. So this is ultimately what is at the heart of what J-PAL does. It's not as if we don't believe that other methodologies, including qualitative work or regressions or big data analysis or modeling, doesn't work. In fact, if you look at the research portfolio of our network, people are doing all of the above, and RCTs is part of the portfolio. But what we believe is that for many important questions, the causality that the RCTs can give provides a really, really rigorous way to try this method. And then, of course, we were very fortunate in 2019 when the Nobel Committee recognized Abhijit Banerjee as the Duflo, two of our co-founders, along with Michael Kremer, for this. These slides are actually dated. Last week was a huge amount of celebration because two more of our affiliates, Daron Asimoglu and James Robinson from Chicago, also won the Nobel Prize. So now we have 5 Nobel laureates in our network who are doing this work. And we've been really fortunate about how this work has picked up. So as of now, we have 2,200 randomized evaluations done by our research network across 11 sectors. I'm sorry, the words might be a little small at the bottom, but it's everything from agriculture, education, and health, but also sectors you may not expect to use an RCT in, for instance, political economy and governance. We've been doing research on how do you reduce corruption, how do you strengthen democracy, do debates work to strengthen the quality of candidates and help people choose between the right candidate or not, and so forth. So really interesting work happening there. Our newest sectors include social protection, and of course, on climate, we've been doing a lot of work. And each of this work is anchored by 7 regional offices. Each of these offices is anchored again at a local host university. For instance, our Latin America office, where Paula is based and runs, is based at PUC Chile. Pancho Gallego, our scientific director, is here as well, and you'll be hearing from him in a little bit. And we also have a partnership with INSPIR in Brazil for hosting a partnership there. I have to figure out my deft touch on this. Just hit it exactly right. And this research is done by a network of 1,000+ researchers based at over 100 universities. Obviously our home base is MIT, but as you will see, this is also something really unique about our center. Yes. Yes. Yeah, fantastic. I think great question. So for those who didn't hear the question was, are the sectors reflecting the program or the outcome? In most cases, it's reflecting what the program and the outcomes are. Most of the time, they are coterminous. It's an intervention designed to improve the attendance of children in a school. So that's kind of very clear. Sometimes it could be a governance intervention, which is designed to improve the attendance of teachers. And kind of then we basically ask the question, what is really of interest to us? Is what is really of interest to us that the teachers show up on time or the doctors show up on time? Or what we really care about is the learning outcomes of the children or the health outcomes of the families? And I think in most cases, the answer ends up being the latter. Nobody cares for the teacher just to show up for the sake of making the teacher show up. We care if it leads to an increase in learning outcomes. So then instead of falling in political economy and governance, it ends up falling in the education sector or the health sector. And so I think that also answers your question about infrastructure. What is it that we expect we don't build infrastructure just for the sake of building infrastructure. So for instance, somebody will come to us, and this is an actual example, and they will say, what happens if we make bus service or public transportation in Delhi free of cost to women? So then our question is, okay, why do you want to make the public transportation access free to women? And they'll be like, somebody will say it's because of the predominant answer is safety of women, so that the women don't get assaulted, and then they can. That's the primary one, and then the downstream one is because of that, maybe the labor market participation of women will increase. And so this could then fall in either labor market or it can fall in crime and violence, and I think people can take a call. But we are not hidebound. It's a very flexible structure at JPAL. Great question. Okay. Yes, so please keep asking questions and raise your hand. And sorry, I didn't see you earlier. Okay, let's do this again. Maybe. Oh, the direction is there. Sorry, it's my ignorance. I'm just pointing it to the TV. Yes, I shall point it there. Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, so I think I already went over this. Our research is affected by, oh, perfect. And the other thing that I think oftentimes people forget about in randomized evaluation versus many other ways of research is that every single project doesn't just have a researcher, it has an implementation partner. It's not as if JPAL goes in and went and did the stubble burning or the happy seeders or other things or the payment for eco services. It was the government of Punjab which was involved, or it's the government of Brazil, or it's the government of Uganda, or it's one of the nonprofits or social enterprises that is involved. I think that is actually a huge strength of the model, very much like IDB doesn't work alone. You work with a local government partner. And I think that brings a local grounding, a contextual knowledge, and an assurance that this is not just an academic exercise, but hopefully people are very interested in the evidence to policy journey. That is the topic for today's discussion. Okay, so that's on the research side. But as I said, like we were established with the understanding that research is not going to be enough, but we need to transform this evidence that we're getting into policy. And so long ago, we put together this framework and said, okay, what do we mean by a policy change or a policy impact? So we identified at least 6 pathways from evidence to policy: applying research insights, adapting and scaling a program, scaling up an evaluation pilot, institutionalizing evidence use so that even after we are gone, people are thinking much more about evidence, scaling back an evaluated program, and then shifting global thinking. I won't be able to cover all of them, but I think I'll pick a couple of these to illustrate what exactly we mean. So let me start with applying research insights and shifting global thinking. This is going to be nothing new to the IDB, but one of the things that is super important is making sure these academic papers turn into a policy note, which is accessible to people in a way that is that they can rely on. And to your point, Anna Maria, earlier about using AI, I think AI is now allowing us to do this, or at least we think it will allow us to do it in a way that is quicker and could often make it much more accessible. Like I've been hearing some of these these two-way conversations that AI generates on academic papers, and it's really remarkable. It's almost like sitting in a room with folks. And then with IDB, we have already produced 3 joint reports on labor market division, and there are 3 more to come in 2025. So we are really, really excited about making this even more customized to the local context and what is useful to IDB. Okay, so then let me tell you, take you through a journey of scaling up an evaluated pilot. So this is a program that I'm actually personally very excited about. Abhijit Banerjee and I co-chair an initiative called Innovations in Government Initiative. I'm a former civil servant. For many, many years, I worked in the Indian government in applying development programs in the field before coming to the US. And one of the things that I always wanted to do was to say, how do we, inspire even more innovation in government, and how do we bring researchers to work with governments? So as part of IGI, we funded this program by Enrique in Mexico, where 95% of all labor court filings were for severance cases, just job termination. Most of these workers who file these complaints in the labor court have never previously interacted with the court. They have no idea what the court process entails. And the labor court system, as you can imagine, is completely backlogged with a lot of these complaints, leading to negative effect of workers. Rather than looking for jobs, they're going back and forth in these repeated hearings. They're wasting their time. They're hiring lawyers, and and they still have concerns about whether they are going to get justice or not. So what was the intervention? The intervention was, okay, so the intervention was kind of three-pronged. Two-pronged. So the first was a calculator intervention. So all parties would receive a customized information about their individual cases, including the predicted likelihood of success and the expected award, conditional if they did actually win this. So, there is obviously a large amount of data which tells you how much people are likely to win given their complaint, what it is. And then the parties, in another treatment arms, the parties were also encouraged to sit with a court's employee to explore the option of settling within the 2 parties before the day's hearing. And then, of course, both of those were part of the treatment arm, and the comparison group was that you neither receive the calculator nor the conciliatory treatment arm. So really, really simple intervention. The data is easy to get and very, very easy to analyze to create these calculations. And what do we see? We see that the same-day settlement rate nearly doubled just in the initial year from 6 to 11%. But most importantly, workers' welfare improved a lot. And this was workers' welfare in terms of their happiness, lack of stress, in their ability to look for other jobs. So a lot of self-reported measures of happiness and welfare actually increased. And now the government of Mexico is using the insights to inform a national labor law reform, which was passed in 2019. So really an example of an RCT, which is tried in the context, and then the government decides to scale it up because from day one, that's their intention. Now, what about taking a program which has been tested in one context and scaling it up in another? So I think there's a paper that JPAL researchers have also written, which I just recommend to read. But there are kind of 2 pillars of generalizability. Like, you can make this as complex as you can, and I'm trying to make it as simple as can. The first pillar is understand the mechanisms driving the change to allow the program to be adapted and scaled in new contexts. And so what do I mean by that? So let me go back to the pollution example. So what was the problem? In India, the pollution is caused by burning of cross residue. In Uganda, this is caused by deforestation. The underlying cause in both cases is that people lose income if they refrain from the undesirable behavior. It's literally the marginal cost of setting your farm on fire is like 2 liters of gasoline, and that's it. Whereas the other thing requires you to pay, to invest in happy seeders or to hand pull it out. So this is kind of, so what's the mechanism? The extra income compensates for the loss generated by refraining from the desirable behavior, and the result is reduced crop burning or less deforestation. So again, not to oversimplify this, but a lot of people just don't think about these underlying mechanisms when they will simply say, oh, this program was done in India, this can't be applied in Bolivia, this program was done in Ghana, it can't be applied in Ethiopia. Even if within India, people will tell me, I can't apply it from one state to the other, or I can't even apply from one district to the other because, oh, that district has a higher population of Hindus or Muslims, and their attitudes, let's say, towards gender-based violence may or may not, their attitudes towards marriage may or may not be different. And I'll be like, but what is the underlying problem? Why is their attitude different? And once you break it down, it kind of really clears out. Um, the second one, again, is going to be absolutely not a surprise to you, but which is understanding the local context. Again, a lot of these programs simply fail because they come from the top. Both the recommendations are extremely simplistic, but we've now worked in dozens and dozens of countries on hundreds of projects. And most of the time, scaling up from one context to the other fails, not because of your point estimates were here or there, or you didn't take care of spillover effects or blah. It fails because people don't think about this basic thing hard enough. And I think this is where folks like you at IDB, folks like us, have a really, really good role to play. This is just showing you that in Latin America, the countries where we have done this work, every time we have partnered very closely with local institutions to make sure that that local context is translating correctly. So here's the example. In 2010, in the Dominican Republic, only 80% of students complete secondary education, but only 25 to 30% complete tertiary. The first only should not be there. 80% completes, the perception of the returns to education, as you can imagine, are very, very skewed. So, by the time you reach tertiary education, the perceived income is far lower than actually the real income by almost a factor of 2x. So people just don't know how valuable and useful it is to attend school. So here is what we did. This is basically, you think about starting from the red. We went into the Dominican Republic. This was research actually, which was originally done in India. Dominican Republic was a country where this was going to be really, really relevant. Paula and her team took the research, which was really originally done in India, and on returns to education, and took it there and helped identify the problem, reviewed the existing literature, created the new program, did that entire translation, and the results were actually very, very useful. This is the Jensen paper, which had originally started this. These are the partners with whom we worked to modify the program and to scale it up. And more than 850,000 students are now being impacted by that. Now Paula's team is taking it to Peru. Okay. All right. So then my final example is on institutionalizing evidence use. On this one, I think this is one of the things that we have tried in now 44 different contexts, which is to create an embedded lab. So what do we mean by an embedded lab? An embedded, there's originally what we used to do is we should embed people in the government. So for instance, one of the first times this happened was at the Minedu lab, but it also happened here with the US government. Under the Obama White House, we got a request to say, can J-PAL help think a little bit more about evidence-informed policy making? And so one of my policy managers from my North America office, we seconded her to the White House, along with a few other organizations which did that. And they thought long and hard about how RCTs are used in government. And that led to the creation of what is now called the Office of Evaluation Services, or OES. And Kelly Bidwell, the manager whom I deputed to the White House, is now the director of OES at GSA. So kind of that got us thinking, that the power of sending the right people to the organization can be really, really powerful. And so that's the model that we have used in creating these 44 embedded labs, where we now embed not just one person, but multiple people inside the organization, and everything from research to policy they think about. They map the policy priorities, map it to the research, bring in researchers, very much like the visiting scholars are coming into the IDB, and help them through think about some of the cutting edge research on how this can be done. Don't know if we have, hopefully we have more examples of that in different countries. We didn't give you examples, but some of these embedded labs, for instance, are in the case of Egypt, we have an embedded lab with the Ministry of Social Planning and Justice. We just opened embedded labs on climate in Cape Town. We have another one in India, which is focusing a lot on air and water issues. The other thing that we are doing, which we would love to partner with you more on, is on a large number of these massive open online courses on using evidence-informed decision making. This is a course which all of these are hosted at MIT. The first column, that is to say. And we have now at this point graduated 4,000 students from this program. If you take the best part about this course is if you take these online courses and you do well in them, you can actually apply to MIT for a 1 semester accelerated master's in economics. It's the only terminal master's in economics degree offered by MIT's economics department. And now we have partnered with a number of universities, including Princeton, to make this a signaling device. And the reason I say this is that a lot of the students coming from Latin America, from Africa, from South Asia, they may not be able to take a GRE exam. Their transcripts might be terrible. They might not even have gone to a regular school. We don't care. 3 years ago, we had a 17-year-old high school student from Singapore who applied for all those 5 programs, who completed all those 5 online courses, did spectacularly. We got him to come to MIT, gave him admission. In 1 semester, he finished his master's in economics at age 18 and a half, went back to do his military service, and now he's back at MIT doing a PhD in economics. And so you think about this person's pathway, right? Like, did not need to take a GRE, did not need to do anything. And you think about, there could be many talented people in the world who are not being, who are being missed out in the system. So that's what we have created this program that we will, if we would love to see more people from Latin America apply. And then Pancho leads this diploma in impact evaluation at PUC Chile, which is focused much more on Latin America, but we also do customized training for partner organizations. We've done a bunch of things with UNICEF and others on how to increase the use of data and economics in decision making. Really, really proud that, we reached about 600 million people by the scale up of these type of programs, which were evaluated by us and found to be successful. When we got the original endowment from Muhammad Jamil, who was an MIT student, to do this as a public service, he set a target for us for 100 million people to be reached in the first 10 to 15 years. And we're really, really glad that that number exceeded far more than that. So we really, really are so excited to make sure that we can be good partners for you. We are very, very excited about this partnership. And the only one thing I will say is that we are totally open to learning. No 2 partners are the same. We will make mistakes. We will do things which you will not like, but we are totally open to feedback. So this is a part of discovery with you. If there's anything that you see or you feel we should be doing differently, we're happy to mold it. We would love to make this a long-term institutional partnership with IDB. Thank you very much for having us.
Are there any questions from the floor or from the participants online?
And sorry, one quick note. I didn't say anything at all about the Visiting Scholars Program because my colleague Paula is going to do that now. So that's why you saw me say nothing about that.
Well, thank you very much, Val, for this great presentation. I would like you to talk a little bit more about these innovation labs that you embed in institutions, and because I think that is obviously a great idea, but to what extent those labs are permanent or temporary, or what is your aspiration of, how what kind of achievement you expect from those labs? Do you expect like the partners in the ground to develop their own labs, or you expect them to be there for forever?
Yeah.
What
No,
is
Thank you, Mariano, for the question. So we are very happy if we are kicked out. The faster, the better. It's very much like I think what IDB's goal is. Our goal is to be there for as long as we are useful, and then the moment our marginal value starts tapering off, we are out of it. So the MinEduLab, which happened in Peru, was exactly that model. In fact, I had the fortune of going back about 4 years ago there, and the number of experiments they are doing, very much like the Office of Evaluation Service, is off the charts. They are doing far more experiments than we could ever have thought they would do. People understand RCTs in a way that is really fun and exciting, and then we are out of it. In terms of the other reason it would wrap up is just in case if we lost funding. So we raise funds to create these labs. So for instance, the lab in Egypt has a 5-year funding from a donor. So we can be there for as much. In most cases, governments adopt it much before the funding runs out. Yes, please go ahead.
If you could use the microphone.
Hi, Iqbal. Thank you. My name is Juan Felipe. I have two questions. The first one, you mentioned one of the generalizability principles is, understanding the local context. I'm curious to maybe hear a little bit more about your experience with failure to take into account that local context, taking into account the fact that many of your impact evaluations are done with local partners on the ground. So where do you think in that kind of like process, what part of the process is failing to incorporate that local context? And then the second question, you have a lot of examples of times you worked with governments. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about, what are the more frequent reasons why you're not able to work with governments? Maybe they're not interested in the services JPL has to offer, whether it's cost, skepticism, or what's kind of like driving maybe some of those challenges working with governments. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So I think I'll give you one quick example. I think this was a study called Sugar Daddies. I think it was done in Botswana, but don't quote me on it. I couldn't be mixing up the countries. But the underlying study found that a lot of transmission of AIDS was happening because of these older men who were making friends with younger girls in high school, and that was leading to transmission of AIDS. And so that led to this, like this sugar daddies intervention, which was basically trying to educate the girls that this is wrong to do, and what are the health implications of this happening. I think we tried to take it to Rwanda, and there, like the government was very, very interested and said this would be great. But when we go there and we do our on the ground field surveys, even the intervention partner thought this would be a good exercise to do. They actually found that the vast majority of sex is between teenagers of the same age. So you did not have this sugar daddy problem. And in fact, when you tell these kids, so what was the intervention? The intervention was like, right, stay within your own age group. This is the safer group to be in. And so these kids are already having a great time, and we are now trying to make them have an even greater time, right? And so that was not the intervention that was needed. So that's an example. The second example, actually, I was involved in myself, which is the government of a southern Indian government in India was was really interested in this thing about why more women are not breastfeeding, and instead, why are they people buying formula? Poor households who can't even afford milk are going and buying expensive formula and giving it to the parents. And so their entire thing was, let's do a whole intervention, because they had seen these behavioral things where you can give insights to the people at the right time. So they had designed this whole program to give insights to the parents on why formula milk is bad and breastfeeding is better. The entire program was designed to the parents about to launch. They said, let's just do an RCT and then we'll do a scale up of it. We send our surveys to the field to ask the baseline questions. Bunch of other questions get asked. One of the questions is, who makes the decision on whether to go with formula or not? And so this is a very culturally, contextually relevant question. It just so happens in India, that person is neither the father nor the mother, it's the mother-in-law. And the entire marketing campaign was tailored to 27-year-old parents instead of 62-year-old grandma. And so once we saw those results, the entire program was stopped. So you can imagine that it would have been a complete waste. Why we don't work more with governments, it's almost always not because they're not interested in evidence. It's almost always because of some combination of I want the results yesterday, not tomorrow. I don't have the time for research. I don't have the time for evaluation. My minister is breathing down my neck. So that's kind of one big thing. The other big thing is this is going to be too expensive, too complicated. It will divert my time and attention from the things that need to be done. So I would say in the vast majority, because we are self-funded, we don't ask the governments for money very much like IDB doesn't ask the money for the money, folks for money. So it ends up being one of these two problems. And then I think we all know the solutions to that. Like this is 80 years of the Bretton Woods institutions, right? Like our grandparents and our parents who were doing this anti-poverty work, they were as well-meaning as we were. They thought they had the best answers when they were, thinking about one laptop per child or community participation is going to be a solution. But they failed, not because they were not well-meaning, but because they didn't have the right answers or they didn't have the right information. So I think it's a process of taking people through that. Okay, so am I out of?
We have a little more time. I don't know if there are any questions. More questions?
Very quick question. How written in stone is these 11 sectors that you show there? Because you can have many more interventions for, like you can help farmers access foreign markets, right? And that, the outcome variable is export flows. But that's just an example. So I just want to know how fixed is this set of 11 sectors that you have there? If you have to work on those, or you have more openness to other areas.
Absolutely. When we created these formal sectors, we started with about 7 or 8. We've gradually increased. Anything that affects the lives of the poor and is RCTable, we will RCT it. We actually talked a lot about this many years ago, and we said, okay, what would we not RCT? And the examples that were literally like, how would the welfare of the rich change if the prices of yachts were to go up or down? So we will not, JPAL will not come into that. But other than that, I think the sectors are very fluid. We are happy to work with you on designing things which either fall in those or outside of those. Yes, please.
Oh, thank you. So thanks so much for this presentation. And one question I had, so obviously, like you mentioned, JPAL affiliates use a lot of different methods. They use randomized controlled trials. They use other methods, including, estrogen flow and Abhijit Banerjee. One of the things I'm curious about is whether, when you think about JPAL's syntheses of the evidence, right?
Yeah.
We have a lot of syntheses on, what have we learned from randomized trials in education, health, infrastructure? How, in that context, when we're thinking about synthesis, how limiting is it, or is it at all, to only be drawing evidence from randomized trials instead of kind of from the fuller body of work? Obviously, there's a lot of value in generating new knowledge from randomized trials in addition to all these others. But when we synthesize, just taking from that one sliver of methods, whether you think that's at all limiting or if not, why not?
Yeah, great question. So I think what we really care about is that there was a good identification strategy for measuring the causality. Even if you read some of our insights, I think what is true is that when we build the cost effectiveness analysis or do a lot of the technical work, we rely on RCTs, but we will rely on a lot of the non-RCT work to build the context and what we know about the field, even if we don't kind of pull those coefficients into the final table that you see. I think the reason we don't do that is not because we don't feel that there is not good value to that, but it's just the mission for us that let's get the RCT bit out there, and then folks like 3IE can hopefully pull that work in very quickly into any broader analysis that they're doing. But it's like, you are the cardiac hospital and you probably don't want to do ophthalmology sort of a thing. But it doesn't mean that we don't realize the importance of the eyes. It's just that we are specialized in that and our resources would just not allow us to do all of that. I think there was one question here that sorry, Paula, you wanted to add something to that?
Now, yes. So one thing we did last year was partnering with the IDB, the labor market division, to build those 3 reports that Iqbal showed, where we pulled information from the RCTs and from the evidence that we think we can bring up, and then the IDB team brought in context information as well. So that's a model I especially like, because working in partnership, we can we can we can have a document that is more useful for this. So I'll invite you to check out those reports.
So quick question. Are governments always required to grant permission to your teams to publish the findings
Yes.
that you find? Yeah.
It's a red line for us.
Okay.
We have very few red lines. The one red line we have is permission to publish the data. We will get inputs from them. We are happy to share the results ahead of time. Happy to, if they feel that we should have done X or tried Y, or we will do all of that. But I think at the heart of this endeavor is the fact that what we are generating is A, public knowledge, and B, it's got to be completely rigorous, and irrespective of the result, the world needs to know. If it's a null result, the world needs to know. If it's a positive result, the world needs to know. So that does end up being once in a while the reason it doesn't work. But I'll actually tell you, it becomes a bigger problem with the private sector than it is with the government. When you work with a large corporate, they are actually far more worried about the negative implications of that, and they insist on this far more than actually sometimes governments do.
Okay, I think we've come to the conclusion of
Perfect.
our Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really. Very, very interesting conversation. I'd like to introduce now Mariano Bosch, who's principal economic advisor in the vice presidency of sectors and knowledge here at the IDB. And we're going to go a little bit more into the program itself.
Thank you very much, Valentina. Thank you, Val, for this great presentation, for being here with the team. It's great to see all these faces, familiar faces. So I'm very happy to introduce Paula Pedro. She's the executive director of JPAL for Latin America, and it's wonderful to have you here, Paula, after all these long conversations, and very, very excited to officially launch this visiting program, business scholars program. Before you, Paula, tell us a little bit more about the program, I just wanted to take a minute to tell you a little bit about how we got here. And Iqbal has already mentioned, pieces of this story, but I just wanted to complement the whole arch. So as Iqbal said, Ilan went to the MIT like a year and a half ago, got together with Iqbal and some other colleagues. And out of that meeting, the message was, let's do something together. Let's do something big, because we want to do more knowledge at the IDB. So then that was kind of a message that we got. And then the next line, which was Paula and I and many other people at the IDB, we had to work it out, how are we going to make this happen? And what does it mean to make something together? Let's do something together. So over the last year and a half, we kind of worked on, how we can implement that. Let's do something together into something that is implementable, and on the way we work at the IDB, at the work that JPAL works. So after many conversations, a trip to Boston, we figured out that maybe the best way for us to move forward was not so much about, finding impact evaluation or a series of impact evaluations that we could do together, but we would be more getting to know each other as institutions, that we know the priorities of each other, and then we can understand better how we can complement each other. So that was the essence of this program. And I want to thank Paula and her team, and how hard they work on making this happen, and the patience that they had, because many of these conversations, we should do this. And it was like, no, I don't think we can do that as the IDB, because of procurement or because of certain things. So it's great that we are here, finally here. And I also wanted to thank a number of colleagues that were part of this conversation: Carlos Cartacini, Fernando Regalia, obviously Jose, Karina, Laura Rojas. They all made possible, that we are here launching this program. And finally, I'd like to connect this conversation with something that Ana Maria mentioned at the beginning. With the new institutional strategy, we are renewing our commitment to become a better knowledge bank. We want to achieve more. We want to have greater impact and impact the scale. And in order to do that, we cannot do that alone because we are small relative to the problem. So we have to bring our friends. So this is a way of bringing friends and partners into this conversation. And with that thought, I'm really excited to open this new chapter of collaboration between JPAL and the IDB. And Paola, please tell us about the program and how we can make this happen. Thank you.
I might need to adjust the mic. How do we do that? This way? Can you hear me? The problem of being 1.5 meters. Bueno, hola a todos y todas. Es siempre un placer estar en esta casa. I'm going to switch to English, but I wanted to start by saying hello in my broken Spanish. Started by thanking this great team, Ana Maria, Mariano, Alejandro, and so many others that helped with putting together the visiting program. As Mariano was saying, I lead the JPAL office for Latin American Caribbean, and my task here is connect Iqbal's words. Thank you for the presentation. I think it was super relevant for this context with what we're trying to do with the visiting program. Let's see if I can learn from evidence and do a slightly better job at clicking. So let me actually go to the next one. Okay. So I want to start by summarizing what I think was the main lesson of Iqbal's presentation, which is the movement from research to policy is important, but it's not easy. And everyone in this room knows that. Can I get just a wave of hands of people who are involved in the visiting program somehow, just to get a sense of who's in the room? Okay. And get a wave of hands of people who have been worked in a specific RCT in the last, let's say, 5 years. Okay, so this is gonna sound very familiar to all of you, but I think what we are particularly excited about this collaboration is to find solutions from some of the barriers we see. So over the past 5 years or so, since we moved so many things through Zoom and through online engagements, we've been asking the participants from our events, from our trainings, and from our conversations, what are the most common barriers you see to evidence use? That connects very well with one of our colleagues' questions around what are the challenges to get those things off the ground? So answers go in a little bit of several directions, but I think I can summarize them in 8 categories. So 1, I have no time to find evidence and to process and to understand this evidence. 2, it's just too expensive to access. So even if I have time, it's expensive to generate. And even if I'm not generating, getting access to journal subscriptions, we know that a lot of organizations don't have access to it. Even if I do have time and I have the resources, why am I doing this if priorities are changing and in a few months things are going to change anyway? Like, why should I invest in this? Why should I invest in this if this is not going to change my professional development, if this is a secondary task that I need to add to my very busy work life? Why should I do evaluations if I already know what the population I'm working with needs? And then finally, my team has a small team, small bandwidth. It's very hard to get the capabilities and the skills to interpret evidence. There's a lack of evidence in the region. I think we all know that, although from the 2,000 plus papers that just JPAL as an organization has about 200 of them are in Latin America. So we're still a region that needs to produce a lot of evidence. And then finally, some other considerations, mostly around the political economy of impact evaluation. So before working at JPAL, I was with the Ministry of Social Development in Brazil, and I can relate to all of those, but the status quo bias, I think we should not be claiming we deeply understand the population, especially from the places of privilege we are in. But all of the other barriers, I can definitely see, I can understand, I recognize they exist. So we need to find ways to lower those costs. And I think what's exciting about this program and about this collaboration is that I think we can exactly do that. Find ways to lower costs, internal and external, so that folks can access evidence and can use evidence and generate evidence. And those are the three things we're trying to build here. The visiting program is a stepping stone, but we think it's part of a larger institutional collaboration between both organizations. And why do I say this? We have two organizations here that have, in some ways, a similar mission, improving the lives of people in Latin America, that get to this mission in different ways. So with using different methodologies, have different sizes. I mean, the JPAL team in Latin America is about 50 people. So I think Mariana at some point in time said, like, you're small, like we're even smaller. Have different methodologies, have different sizes. But at the end of the day, although the languages we're speaking is slightly different, I think it's a little like in Latin America. Some people speak in Spanish, some people speak in Portuguese. But there's a way we can sit down and try to understand each other and find common ground to lower those barriers. So, on one hand, we have the IDB, which is, at least to us, this massive organization that has the scale and the space for the application of evidence, with staff that not only has the technical capabilities, but also is grounded in local context. On the other hand, we have JPAL, which is an organization that focuses solely on the production of this policy relevant, rigorous research, but at the same time, tries to do its best to make sure that the evidence produced, it's actually influence public policy. What we want to achieve in terms of results, I will divide in two. In terms of internal results, I think we can foster between organizations a culture. And I'm going to read, because I cheated a little bit. I used some of the words you have in your strategic planning, which completely gels with what at JPAL we want to see, which is a culture of impact that targets clear outcomes, that prioritizes effectiveness, and that supports agile learning. This is something we can do by bringing researchers here to work directly with the division. And then externally, having in-country programs that are tailored to the population's needs. So using evidence to do better. So what's the visiting researcher program? We define it as a series of residents designed to approximate the IDB and researchers from the JPAL network, with the goal of making the knowledge easier to digest and easier to produce in LAC internally, but also with our partner organizations, and especially with the government. Oh, I thought I was doing well with Paul. There you go. So how does the program work? So I'm going to go a little bit into the mechanics of this. I'm not going to spend too much time because it's I think there's other more interesting things we can talk about. But basically, this is supposed to be an annual program where we start by, each year, the IDB, we're thinking about the 2024-2025 cycle as almost as a pilot. So each year, the IDB would set the priority and ask the divisions which divisions are interested in getting a researcher to visit, what are the priorities, and what are the key questions they want to answer together. We set up a call for proposals. So based on the sectors identified, we go back to our network of almost 1,000 researchers and see who are those researchers interested in coming and working on those questions. We have a series of calls. We have, can I get a show of hands on the JPAL team that is here? Andrea, Sarah, and Elizabeth is right there. So we have the JPAL team have introductory calls with the researchers, but also with the IDB divisions to make sure things are moving nicely, align priorities, and get the language, some of the quote unquote language barriers set. And then we researchers come here from 3 to 5 weeks. Some of the researchers are actually splitting, so they're spending 2 weeks and then they're coming back later in the year uh, uh, to think about a mutual understanding of those key questions. What's the research that can be produced, and what's the evidence available about this specific sector? I know, I'm pretty sure some of the people will ask about in this room will ask about, like, is this just about impact evaluations? As Iqbal said, this is mostly of what we do. There's still researchers that we think there's still interesting conversations that can happen in parallel. But yes, we're trying to get as much as possible, think about working together on developing impact evaluations. And then finally, we organize an evidence sharing event where professors will present, sort of like take stock of what's the literature available, what we know, what we don't know, and how this fits within the IDB's key questions, and how to go about next. What do we expect from an evidence sharing event? This is something we ran in last year, March 2024. You can probably see a lot of faces of your colleagues in the picture. This is the Brazil country office. Pancho Francisco Gallego, who is also here presented. We had a 2-day event where we discussed labor market strategies and results. And I think, at least I thought it was an interesting time to have a dialogue. So the JPAL came in with some information. The IDB had a lot more information in terms of, programs out there, and in terms of the other kinds of evidence. And it was a very nice 2 days to share together. So in terms of the evidence sharing sessions we were expecting. So researchers, the JPAL staff, and the IDB divisions will work on what is the IDB doing in the specific topic? What are the most pressing questions? What is the knowledge that we already have? What is the knowledge that can be produced? And what are the areas for new research? So in which topics? The 5 topics that we identified for the first cycle is just transition. So exploring this intersection between labor market, social protection, and climate, energy and climate change. So looking at electricity, energy systems, and social and economic effects of increased emissions and climate change. Government enforcement. So how do we better enforce government initiatives such as tax regulation, health and elderly care, and citizen security and justice. Those 2 last ones in a little bit more of a broad sense. How do I engage? So if you're part of a host unit, please feel free to identify challenges that you have, and you might think that this is not RCTable. Who knows? So identify those challenges, identify programs that you might be funding and that could be evaluated or are due for an evaluation. Arrange meetings with the JPAL staff and the JPAL researcher. Join in the evidence sharing session. Help brainstorm other applications of evidence. And then for the ones who are not hosting, it's actually not well spelled, who are not hosting the cycle but planning or considering engaging with the program in the future, just participate on the evidence sharing session, see if this is something that it's interesting for your division, and start thinking about challenges that you could address in the future, because we will open for more, I hope, more sectors in the future. So with that, I'm just going to leave those 3 messages here and remind ourselves why we're doing this. This is not just to have JPAL researchers roaming around the corridors of the IDB. This is about having relevant research produced that is aligned with what our countries need. It's about producing rigorous research that is relevant to our policy context. and also pushing the frontier of knowledge. At some point in time, in my second slide, I said that one thing I hear is that there's not enough evidence in Latin America, and that's probably true. But we are part of this. We should be able to create that evidence to also push not only the understanding of how human beings behave in Latin America, but also place and position LAC to push the global knowledge frontier. And with that, I thank you and happy to answer any questions.
So at this point, we're going to transition to the last phase of our session, and I would like to ask Paula to stay up on the stage, Mariano, and also I'd like to introduce Francisco Gallego, who's co-scientific director of JPAL LAC and professor at Instituto de Economía in the Universidad Católica de Chile. So I leave you with these three experts. You have a microphone there, and I open the Q&A session.
Hello. So I'm gonna open for questions very soon, and I'm interested to hearing what are the questions that folks in Zoom have. Jose is doing the background work in sending me some of those questions, so please keep them coming. But I wanted to start by actually asking Pancho, who hasn't had the chance to talk about the program yet. You, as the co-scientific director of JPALAC, as someone who is in academia, someone who has worked with the IDB extensively in the past, like, what are your expectations for the program?
Well, thanks a lot. I'm very happy to be here. It's very excited. You know, I was remembering meetings like 1 year ago with Mariano, Paula, Claudio Ferraz, who was like the former co-scientific director of JPAL, and me at MIT, you know, talking about this. It's very nice to see what's going on. So my expectations, in a sense, I was thinking I was going to say something different, you know, but after I saw like the discussion, in a sense, something that is different and very powerful of these visits by academics, you know, to the BID, to the IDB, is that in a sense, we are going to have three parties here, you know, we are going, and this is new, you know, and this is something that is not the typical, I think, visit that many of my colleagues have had here at the IDB, is that we are going to have like the IDB on one hand, you know, we are going to have a scholar, you know, visiting, but also JPAL visiting. Because what I think is new, you know, is that you saw, you know, this institution, which is very efficient, you know, just 15 people working in the Latin American office, you know, and we have a lot of knowledge, not just on like the academic part, but also on something that Iqbal discussed, like on the ideas on how to move from evidence to policy, you know, on how to disseminate, you know, a lot of knowledge in terms of training, where I think we could like discuss, collaborate a lot with the IDB. So in a sense, I think this is like a new product with a lot of potential because of the potential of the IDB, the potential of JPAL, you know, and as a matchmaking device, you know, I think as you saw, like the names of people that got like interested, we just make like a call to the whole network of JPAL affiliates, which I forgot the number exactly, but it's like
Over 1,000.
Over 1,000 now. Many people like based in Latin America, outside of Latin America. I was really like, I got really optimistic of this initiative when we got like the people applying, you know, the ideas, the motivation.
Perfect, thank you. So we have a question for Mariano online. I think some people are interested to know, and I see this as a great sign. What's the internal process to come in the next cycle?
That is the mystery of the IDB. No, I think just to reiterate something that Pancho was saying, I think this is a new product. I think we're gonna pilot it 24, 25. I think I totally agree with what he said about, you know, the new things that we bring to the table. It's not only about collaborating in a particular impact evaluation or a particular project. It's a coming to the IDB and learning a little bit more about our processes, which I think is really important just for an organization like JPAL to understand how we think about some of this stuff and how our impact evaluations come about and how we integrate those in our projects. So I think I'm really excited about that happening and realizing the needs of the IDB and our clients and how the knowledge and the impact evaluations fits into that process. So I think that would be really good. And in terms of internal process, I think what we're expecting in this 2024 cycle is to have the program going and be successful. And I think we're going to learn a lot about, what are the things that work and what things don't work. Maybe 3 weeks is too little, or maybe it's too much, or maybe there is not enough connection. So, so for us, or at least for me, at the personal level, this year 2025, 2024, 2025 will be about understanding what works and understanding how we can improve these knowledge sharing events. Probably some of them will be great, maybe some of them will not be so great. So understanding that part and looking forward for 2026, I think what we need to do is start earlier. No, the one thing that we realize is that you guys think in academic years and we think in natural years. So there was a little bit of a problem there. So I think we need to start this relatively early so we can implement for the 25, 26 kind of cycle and try to see which teams are interested in this program.
Great, thank you. Yes, someone in the back.
Hi. I am super excited about this and really happy this is happening at the IDB. I've been involved in several similar programs in different times in my career, and I have always benefited very much from all of them. So I am so excited that I'm actually going to complain a little bit, right? and ask some questions to Mariano, of course, that perhaps can help us all. My first one is about the time, right? The time frame. 1 or 2 months is a really short time. If there was any possibility to expand it, I think it would be fantastic. In my experience, the most important part of this process is developing a relationship with the person really spending time here, and or not only here but also in the field, right? And that only happens when you invest a significant amount of time. And so for me, that would be a very important aspect to consider moving forward. The profile of the researcher is also going to be quite interesting. In my experience, it is best when you have a diverse profile. So you have, people who are even still on their PhD program to people who are super senior, and each profile brings a very different thing to the table, and it's everything is very valuable. So, I would encourage us to think about what profile do we really want, or, is it going to be open to different profiles? The publications aspect of it is, I think, something we need to consider as well in the very beginning, before it becomes an issue. And, the possibility of doing something like that would be very interesting, both for us, and who is the author of each paper, obviously, but also for the people who are going to be involved. And, even perhaps for the people we work on the field with, right? Funding, right? You guys haven't said anything about funding. I would be very curious to learn more about what's, the level of funding, both for the projects that are going to be involved in this, both to implement the actual project, but also to foster this collaboration. And, how much is going to be, but also how and for what it can be used. And, my favorite one, I work in education, so obviously I was very disappointed not to see education over there. So who chooses topics that we're going to be working on, and how, and when can we start, submitting ideas and talking to the teams that are going to be making those choices so that we can have an impact in the future. Thank you.
You want to start? You want to start, Mariano? I can complement.
I think all the complaints for me. So I'll happily take them. A few reflection, and Pablo, thank you very much. I think this is, I agree with everything you said. So in terms of process, I think one of the kind of lesson learned of our previous visiting scholar programs is that, I mean, we had a visiting scholar program available every year from KIC. It was never used. I think this is the first, I think this is, no, I think I'm exaggerating. I think it was very rarely used. And one of the issues was that it was really difficult to bring somebody here for an entire year to work with us because, you know, of many different reasons. People are in different career places. It's you know, it's a complicated decision. So we precisely chose this format because we thought it would be a much better way to start engaging researchers, maybe very senior researchers, in like these short periods of time. And we thought together, like, look, I mean, I don't know whether this is going to work. Maybe we need like a longer engagement, but this is going to be definitely easier to start the engagement than, you know, trying to get people, okay, do you want to move to DC for a year so you can work with us? So that was the intention. So maybe in a year you'll tell me, well, this doesn't work, but that was intended. In terms of funding, and I continue with that. So this is something that we at BPS, sorry for the lingo for non-IDB people, but from the vice president, we centralize the funds for this, and we ask the sectors, you know, are you interested in this program? And we will provide the funds to bring the scholars. Not for like the eventual projects that are implemented, and when they're implemented, that's a different conversation. But to bring them, that's something that is covered from BPS with funds from internal funds. So that brings me to your other question: how do you choose the topics? And that was a conversation. That is a triangular conversation between obviously our needs, and I think those needs were, you can complain to David, who's right next to you, that about, you know, what were the needs of the social sector? What are the needs of, so there was a little bit of that. And you know, if there is a complaint because we didn't talk to you personally, I get that. But I think there was a little bit of like, what do we need? What do we see the gaps? And the other part of the conversation is obviously with JPAL, like what can JPAL help us and what are the available researchers that are there? So there is a little bit of back and forth on how we should choose the topics. There is a little bit of supply and demand. But definitely education is one of the sectors that will be very interested in bringing people. And so your final question, I think, I don't know whether I missed something, was, you know, how we can apply for this thing. So in the next round, which we hope to start relatively early, we'll talk to David and see, you know, how we can, the new topics for the 25 to 26. I think that's the thing on my side. I don't know.
No, I was actually thinking about asking Pancho to respond on the profiles of the researchers and how was this decision within JPAL?
I think it's a great idea. We never thought of adding like PhD students, etc. In part, I think the conversation, the decision had to do with the access that JPAL affiliates have within the JPAL. Actually, I wanted to mention this, you know, because Iqbal said something in passing before. So JPAL, when you get like the JPAL person here, we as affiliate professors have access to a bunch of initiatives that are within JPAL. Just for example, Pablo, like this, Iqbal mentioned these sequels of the Jensen paper, like in the Dominican Republic and in Peru and Chile. And that was financed, you know, in different stages. So for instance, we had within JPAL some initiative in education, actually I can think of like 3, where you can ask money for piloting, you know, and we got that money at the beginning, you know. Then you can ask money for RCTs, that we also got that for the Peru part. And there is also money for like scale-ups, you know, and we got money for the Chile part, because then we have learned something from the Dominican Republic and from Peru, and we wanted to scale up in Chile. And we have several challenges, actually. In the end, we ended up actually doing a new RCT because we were not sure of the local context. So from the JPAL part, typically the person, the affiliate professor who comes to this visiting program might have access, to obviously this is competitive funds, everybody applies, but in the whole like part, even one could think of like stuff related to training that JPAL has a lot of stuff going on there, So I would say that the funding part in terms of like the projects, actually, this JPAL person could have access to like competitive, applications in all the stages, from the very initial piloting part up to scaling up some ideas, if that's what like the IDB and the researcher agree on working on.
Thank you, Pancho. I think Jose has a question.
I would like to compliment Mariano on one of the answers. So the visitors, they are coming from 3 to 5 weeks, but in most of the cases, they are splitting the weeks. So there is going to be 1 month or 2 months in the middle, exactly because most of the thematic area leaders, they think this time it's really important to generate trust. So that was a suggestion of the sectoral economic advisors mostly. So thank you. And the other one is for this year. So to choose the topics, we sent an email to all sectoral managers, copying all the sectoral economic advisors, and we got a suggestion of 10 topics. And then among those 10 topics, we have conversations with JPAL, and we're not picking up 5 of them. Thank you.
Please, your question.
Thanks for this conversation. So this is really exciting initiative. I may be wrong about this, but it seems kind of like the implicit goal is to kind of expand the number of RCTs that we're doing. So kind of on the extensive margin. I wonder if there have been any discussions about kind of the intensive margin. So as you probably know, there are dozens and dozens of RCTs that are being done at IDB at any given time. So there was just a competition, and I was surprised about how many proposals there are for the next year of RCTs. I'm just wondering if there are any discussions about the contribution that you guys could make in terms of providing feedback, advice, other kinds of services to the folks here who are already doing RCTs. Thanks.
Pancho, do you want to maybe take this one? Start and then Mariano complements.
Yeah, I think the idea, as Mariano said, we are starting this, and the dynamic of each collaboration might be different, but in a sense, like increasing the quality, of what people do is something that these scholars could get done. I would also say that because I completely agree with you. Actually, when I was preparing for this session, I started listing like the number of RCTs, done by people from the IDB, in the different areas. And it's a bunch of stuff going on. I would say 3 more things, in terms of like not just advice. I think this might open an opportunity to aggregate knowledge in a sense of like collecting information of different areas, and getting something like, I don't know, these cost-effective approaches to increase global learning that the World Bank with the JPAL and other people are doing. We can do something like that here in Latin America. You see my point? So maybe there is something here that is not just increasing the number of RCTs. I, as a professor, I am happy of doing that, but I think people that are coming, also want to maybe, aggregate information, disseminate this information. I want to emphasize this, like this evidence to policy part that Iqbal discussed is very important for JPAL. Now we want like policies to be informed by evidence, and there are like many dimensions. I'm thinking about tutoring, for instance, where you want to scale up stuff that we know, and this might also be something that's produced with this collaboration. So I don't think that is just at this stage of the age that JPAL has, the maturity is not just creating new RCTs, Actually, in a sense, actually we had discussions about this. I remember last year in Boston. sometimes you don't need to run a new RCT. We already have RCTs. The thing is how communicate. See my point. So I like a lot the way you put it. It's not just the extensive margin. It's something that might complement. What the knowledge we have. Maybe we need to create new knowledge in some areas. Where we don't have enough RCTs. Yeah.
No, I fully agree with what Pancho said. I think I see this. I don't know how this is going to evolve, and it's not the ultimate objective that we're going to bring this partnership and increase the number of RCTs. At least from the IDB perspective, that is not the objective. I think there's so many different ways that this can complement. One of them, Pancho said, maybe it's about the intensive margin. Maybe it's about synthesizing all the knowledge that we have, which, by the way, will be really useful for us from our internal documents point of view when we think about the sector framework documents, which are documents where we synthesize all the knowledge that we have in a particular sector. This is something that I'm hoping this visiting scholar program will help us. And yes, ultimately we can embark in new projects, in new RCTs. But I see this richer than just, okay, let's get together and see what is the next project that we can do. I think I also hope that this collaboration can help us bring a lot of the knowledge from outside the Latin America and the Caribbean as well. I think that part is also an objective which you are more connected than we are. So I think we'll see. That is not from our side. It's not like we have many RCTs going, whatever, 50. We want to increase to 150. That is not what I'm thinking about.
And I think if I can add something, I think the beauty of this is that it's limited enough so we can explain nicely in one slide, but flexible enough so we can customize and change as we grow, as this program develops. And I think the fact that this is a three-party collaboration, as Pancho was saying, it also means that there will be JPAL staff besides the researchers around that can easily talk to you and think about other ways to collaborate. So for us, is also a great opportunity to engage in a more systematic way with the IDB team. And we're very happy to go into different sectors. And we have an education economist right here, right? So we're very happy to see different ways to engage with the different sectors and finding a format that works for the sectors. And I agree with Mariana. I mean, RCTs, of course, we want to increase the number of RCTs in Latin America, but this is way richer than just a mechanical goal of a KPI. We're going to launch 2 RCTs in the next year. I think we have time for one. Iqbal?
So, sorry. One quick thing. Somebody asked that I wish this program was longer. I think the purpose of these folks here is to come and get to know everybody, but it's not as if they cannot be on Zoom calls and other things. It's just the start of a relationship, but the relationship, I think, will keep going throughout the year. But I actually have one reverse question for you. One of the things that has probably changed from previous visiting scholars to now is that post-COVID, you have work from home and the hybrid model. So given that most people come in to maybe 3 days a week, how do you think that we might want to maximize the use of these these 3 to 5 week time? Does it have to change in the way the scholars program? Because even if they are here for 5 weeks, if they are only seeing people for 2 days of the week, then in a sense, we have lost 3/5 of the time.
I think that's an excellent question, and we'll have to see as we implement. But I think the idea would be that we can coordinate the, let's say, interviews or meetings with like different teams. I think one of the things that you'll find, or these researchers will find, is that they go into a particular sector. They don't have to talk with just one person that does the research or a research team. There are many different aspects of what that sector does. There's people that do something that we call operations, which essentially is the loan. There's people that do, their collaboration with how to organize the policy dialogue. So there are many different teams that I would like these researchers to meet and to understand what our processes are. So hopefully that helps into organizing these 5 weeks in an efficient way where they can meet everyone. But yes, there is the risk, like, and it's not only the 3 days a week thing, like a lot of our staff are traveling most of the time because they are in the field. My Greg goes to Brazil all the time, Chile. So I think, yes, that's something that we'll have to organize well, but also hoping that, it's not those 3 weeks or 5 weeks. There's something that we can continue just, through Zoom calls or any other way. I think that we have to make it work.
Okay, well, I think that concludes our session. Thank you all so much. It's been really, really interesting to learn about this new program. I hope it's gotten you all excited to leverage it. And thank you for our speakers. Have a great afternoon.